The New York Times has just released a report saying that Australia is punching not above, but below its weight. The source for this is Mr. Michael Fullilove, director of the Sydney-based Lowy Institute. Mr. Fullilove blames as the principal cause of this the Queen. He joins Mr. Al Grasby, who years ago announced to the country that the rate of unemployment here, was the result of the Queen. Republicans, however, before the referendum, began to abandon their sillier and sillier reasons for becoming a republic, and they decided that the reason henceforth would be because this was the only way we could have an Australian as head of state. And that was what they argued, for example, 9 times in the Vote Yes part of the Yes-No booklet in 1999. I know that very well because I did the first draft of the Vote No part of that booklet. But Mr. Fullilove, who's also endorsed this reason for becoming a republic, should check this out with Malcolm Turnbull, because Malcolm Turnbull, during the 2016 election, was criticised for not being present for the return of the remains of those who'd fought in Vietnam. And he went on air on 2GB and the Macquarie Media Network twice to give a very considered excuse for his absence. And what he said was, but the Australian head of state presided over the return of those remains, the ceremony then. The Australian head of state, he said, Sir Peter Cosgrave. So here the head of the Republicans was admitting what we've always said is the case, and which all politicians will sometimes say is the case. That is, we already have an Australian as head of state. Now, Australians wouldn't be lying awake at night about this, wondering who their head of state is. In fact, until the Republicans decided to use this as their sole reason for the massive expense and risk of their very sinister form of politicians' republic, not a real republic, but a politicians' republic, the politicians decided that they would use that, and nobody else knew what a head of state was. Only diplomats and international lawyers knew this. It wasn't even in the first edition of the Macquarie Dictionary. But all this has been put back into issue again because Mr. Shorten says if he becomes Prime Minister, he will try again. After all those millions have been spent, he'll try again to persuade Australians to turn the country into a politicians and not a real republic, notwithstanding the fact that Australians overwhelmingly rejected the last attempt in the referendum. And Mr. Shorten has decided to do this in a way which goes against, if not the letter, the spirit of the Constitution. Because the founders of this country, and the people agreed with them on this, the founders decided that if there were ever to be a change, it would be the people who would decide that, and they would decide that by way of a referendum. The founders would not have a bar of a plebiscite. They wouldn't have a bar of a plebiscite because they knew from the French Revolution and the 2 Napoleons that plebiscites are used in a way where the people are given no reasons and no detail. With a referendum, the details are on the table before you vote. With a plebiscite, you're given the details after you voted. And that's what will happen with this plebiscite, because in the second plebiscite, you'll be told the sorts of republics which are acceptable to Mr. Shorten. And principally, they will be politicians' republics. So where are we now? We have this situation where Mr. Shorten will push this plebiscite, and this first plebiscite will be essentially based on what every politician knows or should know is a lie. Mr. Shorten himself was a minister in a government which sent the Governor-General overseas, and foreign governments were all told about the Governor-General that she was the Australian head of state. Because the term head of state is a diplomatic term. It's not a constitutional term. ACM has always said this. And we've assembled now a team of top experts who will confirm what we have been saying all along. The politicians say when it counts, that is that we already have an Australian as head of state. And this plebiscite, as I say, will be based on a lie, and it will be based on an improper process. ACM has never chopped and changed. We've always argued against the misuse of constitutional plebiscites. We don't go along with the line of some, that some plebiscites are good and others bad. They're all bad because we know they're bad, because whenever politicians try to use them for constitutional purposes, we know they're up to no good, as we see here. So we will be fighting this. We are consistent on this, and we have a team which will support our views that we already have an Australian as head of state. So be assured, ACM, which was the engine room of the 1999 referendum, the landslide result which defeated the Politicians' Republic, ACM, which led the United Front of the No case at the Constitutional Convention, ACM, which was established in 1992, which has been audited every year, which is strictly not-for-profit, invites you to support us. And you can do that by going to our website, norepublic.com.au, norepublic.com.au. We don't charge. We are audited, but we don't charge. We depend solely on donations. And you know that the monies spent by ACM are spent towards our purposes because we are audited and have been audited every year. So do join us. I'm David Flint. I'm from ACM. And I ask you to do two things, apart from supporting us. Firstly, if you are asked in a plebiscite to vote for a Politicians' Republic, say no to the Politicians' Republic, and never, ever give a blank cheque to the politicians. Until next time.